Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Is this Tejas?
No, sir. Akhil.
Akhil,
Good
okay.
morning, sir.
Yeah. Good morning. Yeah. So, okay. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, sir. It is clear, sir.
Okay. Okay. So, shall we start now?
Sure, sir.
Okay. Yeah, so, let's start with what we did last time. Uh, so, we started with this equation. That's the Planck's equation for back body radiation. And of course, in previous
Sir,
lectures, we have.
sir, your presentation is not visible.
It's not visible. I see.
Yes, sir.
But says presentation. Okay, let me disconnect and then restart. Is it visible now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
But sir,
So
it is not.
it's not coming to your computer?
Sir, I'm not on computer. I'm on tab.
Okay, but you are not able to see the presentation?
Yes, sir. I'm not able to see the presentation.
Okay, can you do one thing? You can, there will be like a list of the chat participants. I mean, list of the participants in the meeting. You go there, and then there will be two names. There will be my names will be twice, one for the presentation and one for the calling. So can you just check it and see you are actually. Hello.
Yes, sir.
So I mean, you are able to see it, and but she is not able to see it. So question is why?
Screen is visible now. Planck's law of black body radiation. It's visible.
It's visible, but Pooja is not able to see. Pooja, can you see it now?
No, sir. No, sir. I'm not
Pooja, try
able
to
to.
disconnect and connect again.
Okay, sir.
Students, you are able to see now. Anyone can reply?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I think now. Okay, can you see it now,
Yes, sir.
Pooja?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It is visible.
Okay, good.
Thank you, sir.
So I just I'm starting with like reviewing what we did last time. We started with this Planck's law that's shown here, and in fact, I asked you to actually convert it to the wavelength domain. This is a frequency domain, and I think you people already submitted it. I have not checked your assignments, but I'm happy that lots of you have already submitted the assignment. And we also saw in previous lectures that how we arrived at this law. Okay. And then I asked you to plot this spectrum. I have not checked the assignments, but I don't know how many of you have actually plotted this curve. But anyway, you can do this as an exercise. What I want to emphasize is that the area under this curve, okay, as the temperature increases, it is increasing, okay, but it's not linearly increasing. Another thing is that this peak, where this peak occurs, that position is shifting as the temperature increases. the position is shifting, and this shift is linear. These are the two kind of observations which were available to the scientist, and that has led to actually the deriving the Planck's law. Okay, and then what we did is that we had the Planck's law and we tried to derive that what will be like area under the curve and what will be the value of the peak. So how did we do it? So what we did is that so we wanted to find out the total amount of the energy, and then for the total amount of the energy is the area under the curve, and that we did it using this integration, and then we found this equation. That equation is Stefan-Boltzmann law. I again and again emphasize that. I mean, now it looks very trivial. I mean, if you have a Planck's law, why you need a Stefan-Boltzmann law? But actually, the Stefan-Boltzmann law was derived first, and then the Planck's law came. So that's the history hanging over this equation. That's what you should appreciate. Okay, so this is the equation that tells you that how much energy will be emitted, and that's very, very fundamental. I mean, we have already used this equation for finding out the temperature of the Earth. Okay. Then we also found this equation that peak of the curve. Okay, at what wavelength the peak should occur, and how did we do it? So if you do a differentiation and equate it to the zero, that will be the peak of the curve. That I think basic differentiations you might have learned in your BSc classes. And if you do that for this equation of the wavelength, equation of the Planck's equation in terms of the wavelength, this is what you get. And I ask you people to find out the similar relationship for the frequency. You start with Planck's law in the frequency domain, and then you get this here. So you will get one constant like here. And I think most of you might have submitted, but I have not, as I said, I have not been able to look into the your assignments so far because I was out of station. So can you tell me, if you would this equation in terms of the frequency, what would be that equation? Hello? Do you remember? I think you have done this as an assignment. Lambda max, similarly mu max equal to something. What is that equation? Maybe you can write down, or you can just raise the hand and speak. Yeah, anybody? Hello? I hope you are able to hear me.
Yes, sir.
What I want is an equation that is for the mu max.
So final equation.
Sorry?
Sir, you want the final equation for nu max?
Yes, Danny has written that equation 500. Okay, let me see before I could read it. So Danny has written equation 583.7 into 10 to the power 8 t. Okay.
Yes, sir.
How many of you have found this number?
Sir, I found this number.
You have found the same, exactly same number?
Yes, sir. I found mu max is equals to 5.876 into 10 raised to 8 terahertz. Sorry, temperature. मतलब temperature का value given नहीं है, so temperature as it is रखा है.
Okay.
And this value is in hertz.
Yeah. So fine. So temperature. So this is the equation for the. If you are using temperature into the Kelvin, okay. If you are use the equation into centigrades, it will look little different. But it's all right. I mean, the number that Danny has written here is correct. 583.7 10 to the power 8. Now, what I want you to do is that find out the what will be the. So if you are looking at the solar spectrum, if you are analyzing the solar spectrum. where you will find the peak of the wavelength. So for the wavelength, we have this equation that is given here. Lambda max equal to 2897.8 divided by T. So if you need to find out T, actually we can do a reverse exercise. We can find out the temperature of the sun by finding out first because we can measure the lambda max, we can find out the lambda max from the spectrum analysis, but I want to do it in reverse way. Let us say temperature of the sun's surface is 6,000 degrees Kelvin. What will be the lambda max?
So what is the temperature value?
Temperature is 6,000 degree Kelvin. How many of Heath Joshi has written 482 nanometer? How many of you have found this answer? Okay, Hers also has found similar number. So we will take 582 or 583 nanometer as an answer. That's a correct answer actually. It's little if you have seen the real solar spectrum. Do you know where is the maximum? Okay, Heath has replied that 550. So that's the correct answer. Something around 500 nanometer is the peak of the solar spectrum, but because we have not used really exact temperature, we have just taken 6,000 degree Kelvin just as an kind of a number. We are getting 482, so we are very close to that temperature. So that's like an approximate temperature of the solar surface or the surface where we are getting the radiation from. What do you expect for the solar spectrum? I mean, suppose, of course, we cannot go to the sun, but because the temperature will be, we will all burn off. But suppose you will be able to go to the sun, what do you expect at that? At that altitude, at that place where you are getting the radiation? How dense would be the solar surface? What is the kind of density do you expect?
So can you repeat the question?
See, we have found the temperature. We know that when people say what is the temperature of the sun, the typical answer is 6,000 degree Kelvin, or that number around that value between 5,500 and 6,000 degree Kelvin. So if you look at the sun from the disk, it will look like a disk. And if you have been able to travel to the sun and find out really measure the density of the atmosphere of the sun at that altitude, where this radiation is coming, at that altitude where there is temperature 6,000 degree Kelvin, what do you expect in terms of the sun's surface? And what kind of the densities you are expecting there? Of course, this is not related to the radiative transfer equation, but I want to have the real appreciation for the astronomy. I don't want to lead some misleading concept. See, when you look at the sun, it looks like a kind of a very, you may expect that, of course, sun's density is very, very high. If you compare to even though sun is made of the gas, its density is very, very high into the core. But the place where we are getting radiation, you cannot expect very high density. It will be very, very thin density, even maybe thinner than the atmosphere. That density may be even lower than the atmosphere of the Earth. But because the temperatures are so high, for example, you can have a gas filled bulb, and then you actually kind of increase the temperature, and then radiation will come. For example, flame. If you're looking at the flame, it will look like a kind of a very object kind of things, but it's basically a hot gas. Okay, and even very few molecules of the air also you can heat it up, and it can give you a radiation. So yeah, so Kavita has written the values for that density. Good. So okay, now I want to. So you have found the lambda max, and there's something around 483 nanometer for the values of 6000 degree Kelvin. Suppose I say you find the frequency max, mu max. What will be the value? We have just now had an equation for that. Who has written that equation? Dhyani has written that equation into the chat box, and using that equation, that is a 587.3 10 to the power 8 into temperature in Kelvin. You can get the frequency. You can get the frequency where the peak of the curve will be, where the intensity will be the maximum. So 483 nanometer is the wavelength where the intensity is maximum. I want to find out in terms of the frequency where the intensity is maximum. What will be that number? Please do it fast. I mean, it's such a very trivial question. That is an 3.523 10 to the power 14 hertz. Okay, that's a correct answer. How many others has got the same answer? Okay, that's good. Okay, good. I think Pooja has got, Margi has got, Heath has got. They are all correct answers. So good. Now use the temperature I have already given you. Okay. No, so temperature of the Earth. Temperature of the Earth is 300 degree Kelvin. Typical temperatures is like a 300 degree Kelvin. Okay. There can be little higher. Sometimes there can be little lower. Sometimes some places. But let us take a 300 degree Kelvin temperature and find out the lambda max and mu max for the Earth. This is what we have found for the Sun. But I want you to find it for the Earth now. Suppose Earth was a black body object and it was radiating, let's say with 300 degree Kelvin, and your job was to find it. You are like an alien coming from some other planet and trying to see what kind of atmosphere is there on the Earth. So first thing you do is then measure the temperature and trying to find out what is the lambda max, so you can know the temperature of the Earth, or at least now you know the temperature of the Earth. So Dhyani has got the answer 9.65 nanometer. That's a wrong answer actually. Who else has calculated? Margi has got the answer 9.65 micrometer. Okay. Who else has got the other answers? Okay, so if you multiply 10 to the power minus 6, then nanometer becomes then what becomes? Nanometer becomes? I'm not sure. Okay, Kavita has got frequency 2 into 10 to the power 14 hertz. Let me check my calculations. I think that's not the right answer. That doesn't seem to be Kavita's answer. Doesn't seem to be right. I have to check it. I have not done it. But Dhyani's answer for the frequency is correct. Danny's answer for the frequency is correct answer. 1.76 10 to the power 13. Kavita's answer doesn't seem to be correct. Who else? This has to be an interactive session. I don't want to be like speaking, and I mean, you can just watch a video. I mean, there are a lot of YouTube videos are available, whatever you want to learn. So, what is the point just listening to? So, yeah, Pooja has got a correct answer. 1.76 10 to the power 13. That is the frequency. That is the frequency where the radiation will be maximum from the Earth. What is the wavelength? There is one answer from Margi, 9.65 micrometer. How many of you have got this answer? Okay, Danny also got 9.65. Yeah, so 9.65 micrometer is a correct answer. So you see the difference. The maximum intensity for the solar radiations will be around 500 nanometer. Maximum intensity for the Earth's radiation will be around 10 micrometer. Okay, and that is what is important for the climate science. Okay, that's why when we study the climate of the Earth, we study solar effect of the solar radiation separately from the effect of the long wave radiation that is outgoing. This is because we can, I mean, you can see there is quite a big separation between them. So, okay, one more exercise I want to do. You had this. You had this lambda mu max for the sun. That was how much? Sorry, how much it was? 3.5 10 to the power 14. Mu max. Okay, you got I think of this order the answer of mu max. Now you know the relationship between the frequency, wavelength, and velocity for the waves. Okay, you also know the velocity of the light. That's 300,000 kilometer per second. If you convert this nu max into the wavelength, what will be the number? I want you to calculate wavelength corresponding to the nu max. I hope you are getting my question. You have understood my question. We have found using the Wien's law what would be the lambda max, what will be the mu max for Earth and for Sun. Now I want you to find out wavelength for nu max for the Sun. Not using the Wien's law, but using this relationship. Very good. 850 nanometers. Misal. What is the what is the pronunciation of your name?
Sir, it's Misal.
Misal, okay. Misal has got the answer 850 nanometer. You remember the earlier answer, the lambda max that you got from the Wien's law, that was 480 nanometer. Okay. Danny also has got the answer. Okay. So I want you to appreciate this difference. Okay. Lambda max is not same as the mu max. It's where you are getting the peak intensity for the wavelength equation is not at the same place as the peak intensity for the frequency spectrum. You should able to appreciate this fact. And why this has come, if you would have, when you have converted this equation in terms of the frequency, from frequency to the lambda, you would have noticed that you actually require one extra lambda into the denominator. and that is where it comes from, because your intensity unit as a per micrometer or per hertz unit, and when you convert this unit, this is what it has an effect. So they are not an equivalent. It's not like you can do this, you can use this wave equation and directly get the lambda max from the nu max. Okay, it would be a different thing. If you were to measure the spectrum throughout the frequency, you get the peak at some wavelength. If you measure the spectrum directly into the wavelength, you get the peak at different wavelength. Okay, so earlier you got the answer was 485 nanometer of that order. Now we are getting around 850 nanometer. You should appreciate. You should remember this fact. It's not like if you are asked to do the lambda max, you are already provided by nu max. You cannot directly calculate the lambda max. Okay, that's it. Okay. In last lecture, we also learned that Kirchhoff's law, and from Kirchhoff's law, it follows that maximum emission happens from the black body. Absorbing material actually has more emissions. Many people find it very counterintuitive. Okay, but that's I mean, if you look at the equation, that's the fact. I mean, gray object has a less emissions than the black object. Okay. Okay. So we learned these 4 laws last time, and these 4 laws, like a fundamental laws, they gives where does this radiation arises and what it would look like, and what are the factors it depends. I mean, what are the universal factors that it depends on to it, and that is temperature. So as far as black body radiation is concerned, all that matters is a temperature. Okay, we know that we don't get the black body radiation all the time. We never have smooth curve like smooth spectrum like black body curve we can calculate. What we have is very kind of a spectrum that has an absorptions and deeps and so on. So, for example, if you see an object, for example, from the black body laws, you expect that when temperature is very high, an object will appear red for a very high temperature. But doesn't mean that all the red object, I mean, if you are wearing shirt, red color of shirt, doesn't mean that you have a temperature of the order of 5,000 degree Kelvin. Okay, still you appear, I mean, if you wear a red shirt, you will appear red. And why that is happening? That's because selective absorption. Okay, and John von Fraunhofer was the first person to study the absorption lines. Just excuse me for 2 minutes. Huh? Sorry for disturbance. I got the urgent phone call in between. Where were we? Yeah, so Fraunhofer was the first person to systematically study the absorption line into the solar spectrum, and he cataloged those lines. And still, many of these lines we are known with his what the designation he has given. Okay. So you remember how the black body curve would look like. That would be very, very smooth. But this is what the actual curve of solar spectrum will look like. And each deep you are seeing is corresponding to this absorption line. And then we also learned last time that why this absorption line, where does it arises from? Why there is a selective absorption of certain wavelength of the light. Okay, and that arises from the quantum mechanics, because electrons can have only certain angular momentums, so they can have only certain kind of an orbits, and when they jump from one orbit to another orbit, either there is an absorption is taking place or the emission is taking place. Okay, and that would be, and that wavelength of that emissions or that absorption would be given by this delta E equal to h nu. Okay, and from that h is a Planck's constant, and from this we can calculate the frequency. Last time I asked a question that out of these 4 series, which series will have the lowest wavelength? And what was your answer? Remember? Some of you have given the correct answer.
Lyman series.
Yeah, Lyman series is the correct answer. Okay. And what I want you to, you can actually find out what will be the wavelength. Okay. What will be the wavelength of the Lyman series transitions?
364 nanometer. 364 nanometer.
Sir, it's 991.7 angstrom.
Okay, 364 answer was the wrong answer, but there was somebody given another answer. Dhyani, I think you have given answer. What was that another answer? Somebody has given something 9. I couldn't hear the full answer. Can you repeat your answer? Okay, Dhyani has given 911.7 watt, nanometer, micrometer. What is the unit of Dhyani? 911 angstrom. Okay. Okay, so that's the correct answer actually. So if you have a spectrum like a violet to red, then there is an ultraviolet and so on, and then there are like infrared and all those things. Which part of the spectrum this wavelength would be? Is this wavelength smaller than the blue wavelength, or is this the wavelength higher than the red wavelength? I hope I am audible. Okay, Margie has given a correct answer. That's an ultraviolet. Okay, all the Lyman wavelengths would be into the ultraviolet UV. Yeah, correct answer. Thank you. Yeah, so if you had an experimental physicist and if you would have measured this spectrum of the light, particularly for the hydrogen atom, this is what you would have kind of in continuous intensities, then there will be like absorption at certain wavelength. And not only that, if you notice there is like a gap between this and this line, and this gap goes on reducing. Okay, and if you look at this previous curve, you see the energy level gaps. Okay, and this they kind of correspond to each other. So this is yeah. So my point is that actually this figure came first. People measured the spectrum first. Okay, Kavita has a question. Why shouldn't be the 364 nanometer the lowest wavelength? If we are measuring only the solar spectrum sitting onto the Earth's surface, then then the 364 is something that you will be able to measure the lowest value. Okay. H delta is 410 nanometer. I don't understand what do you mean by H delta. Okay, but let me first finish the answer to your first, that 364 nanometer, where that number came from. So if you are measuring the spectrum, solar spectrum sitting onto the ground, you will not get any wavelength below 364 nanometer. This is because most of the radiation lower than the wavelength lower than the 364 nanometer will be absorbed into the atmosphere. So you will not get any radiations from the sun to coming to the Earth's surface below 364 nanometer. But if you are into a laboratory and you excite the hydrogen atom inside the laboratory, or you have a wavelength, you have a spectrum within lower wavelengths, and you put the hydrogen atoms in between the path of the detector and the source, you will be able to see this wavelength. So that's the answer for your question. Okay. Okay. There is another question that H delta is 410. Doesn't make sense to me. Anyway, what I wanted to emphasize in this figure is that this is what to measure the first, and then you try to find out what is the energy levels. Okay, so this figure actually in real life in this came this first, and this understanding that there are energy levels like this, they are distributed like this, has come afterward. And to understand this so to make this energy level like this, you need this kind of equation. So this equation came afterward, and to have this kind of an equations, you should have the model like this that came even afterwards. So actual process that is happening in the history is in reverse way. What we are learning is we learning that we have this model, then this is what we expect. But what has happened in the history is that this is what we observed, so that is why it should be like this. Okay. Okay. So why does that any radiations that lose the energy to the spectrum? How does the material and the electromagnetic wave interact with each other? Okay, Kavita is one more point. Yes, Sun is an G star. I don't understand. I mean, as far as Lyman series is concerned, it has nothing to do with Sun. Okay, it is a spectrum of an hydrogen atom. Okay, so yeah, so I don't know. I mean, what kind of star? I mean, my astronomy is not that good, so I don't know what kind of star is the Sun. But if you go out of the atmosphere, you actually expect you can get the wavelength lower than the much lower. I mean, you can get the X-rays from the Sun if you go below, go out of the atmosphere. That is how the many of the observations of the Sun are made. Okay, so whether it is G star or not, it doesn't matter. I mean, you can get the wavelength. Only thing is that intensity will be different. If star at a very high temperature, you may have the intensity higher. If you star at a lower temperature, for example, there is a star called Sirius. That star has a temperature around 10,000 degree Kelvin. So there you get your peak wavelength will be different, and you will get all the wavelengths, but with higher intensities. Okay. Okay. So let me come back to the interaction of the electromagnetic wave and matter. So how does it interact? So what is the electromagnetic wave? It is an oscillating electric field. Okay. Propagating in certain direction. Okay. And if there is a material nearby that has some kind of a charge. Okay. For example, if there is an electron into the or there can be a molecule like H2O that has a kind of a permanent dipole. Okay. So when this electromagnetic oscillations happens near to these molecules trying to kind of align its orientation such that so they match with the electromagnetic field of the radiation. But by the time they have aligned themselves to this radiation field, your field again changes. So like motor, you know how the motor works. Okay, you have the ups and downs, and I mean you have the changing electric field, electric current, and then it drives the dynamo. Similarly, this changing electric field near these molecules keeps on so molecules keeps on trying to adjust with this changing electric field, and because of that, it's kind of it will start rotating or vibrating or moving and doing things like that. So when this is happening, it is kind of taking away the energy from the electromagnetic radiation. Now, one kind of energy we have talked about was an electron in different states. That is called electronic energy. Okay, but molecules can have a very many different kind of energy. For example, molecules are keeps on moving, so there is a kinetic energy, and then molecules can rotate like this, for example. Okay, that is called rotational energy. And when there are like multiple molecules in multiple atoms in a single molecules, they can vibrate in very different manners, and that's called vibrational energy. So when this is happening, so when this electromagnetic field is passing near these molecules, their vibration changes. They're trying to, because these molecules are trying to adjust with the changing electric field of the radiation. But not all that they can do whatever they want to do. Okay, quantum mechanics says that these energy states are quantized, and only certain energy states only they can take. So when radiation is going, so they can change energy only if that energy state is allowed as per the quantum mechanics laws. Otherwise, they cannot interact with the radiation. So only the certain frequency of the wavelength only will be removed. Only certain frequency of the radiation only will be absorbed, and rest will pass through the material as without being affected. In fact, microwave energy, if you are, nowadays most of the houses have microwave. You can use, people use it for the cooking. Why? Because you put the radiations and it increases the rotation of this H2 molecules, and that heats up the material. The water molecule present into the food kind of gets heated up because they interact with the radiation, get higher rotations. Okay, so the point I want to make is that you have electromagnetic radiation going, is trying to interact with these things, but not all the energy can be interacted. Only that is allowed with quantum mechanics that be allowed, but there are various kind of energies that quantum mechanics allows, and all of them are like quantized states. So if you had only rotational energy states, this is what the spectrum will look like. This is the spectrum will look like when you have a kind of an atom and you have electronic states changes. But this is the spectrum when you have changes in rotational energy levels. Okay. What you are seeing here in this figure is this. So green curve is a spectrum of the water molecule into the vapor form. Then blue curve you are seeing here, that is a spectrum of the water molecule into the liquid form. And there is a red curve here, and that is the spectrum for the water molecule into the ice form. Now you see there is a difference, even though their atomic structure is same, nearly same, not exactly same, but very close. That you see there is a difference into their spectrum. This is because when water molecules in the water vapor form, it has much more freedom to have rotations and various kind of vibrations and so on. But when these molecules are very close to each other, they can have only certain kind of vibrations. They may not have rotation at all, or if that rotations are there, they may be restricted because of their interaction with nearby molecules. So that is why you get very different kind of a spectrum for these things. And that is kind of an open basis to find out whether, let's say if you are studying some star, in fact, this is spectrum observed for the one of the moon of the Jupiter. Okay, and that is how we find out that on that moon there are a lot of liquid ice, water ice. Okay. So again, let's go back to the fundamentals. So why we are worried about these absorption lines? Okay. So what is that ultimately we want to do with radiative transfer? As a radiative transfer as a science, we want to find out transfer of the energy from one place to another place. Okay. And to find out this transfer of energy, if this was only the black body radiations, it would have been very easy. You measure the spectrum, you integrate the area under the curve, and that is all you. Then that is the total amount of energy. But area you under the curve you can integrate very easily if it is only the it is only the black body radiations, because it's a smooth curve. It would be a smooth curve, and we have kind of an analytical solution sigma t power 4. So all you need to know was the temperature. If you know the temperature, you can find out how much energy will be transferred. But the real world is very complex. The radiation from the earth, radiation from the sun that reaches to Earth's surface, not all of them reaches. There are dips into this spectrum, and because of that there is less energy reaching to the Earth's surface, and you want to find out how much less it is reaching, or what exactly is reaching to the Earth's surface. So what you need to do is then find out the area under the curve. But now your curve is not smooth. In fact, if you kind of zoom into it, it would look like this. Okay, and now if you want to find out the area under this curve, for example, it would be not an easy task. Okay. So what you need to do is that you have to find out the shape of each line. Now, if you see, each line looks different from each other. Some lines are very deep but narrow. Some lines are broad. This is what causes this changes into the line shape. So when I say line shape, what does it mean? It means, so if I'm looking at this spectrum like this, okay, I will notice a line, okay, and that line can be gray, or it can be like a very wide line, or it can be very dark. And this is all. So what I'm kind of characterizing is called line shape. This is what it means by the line shape. Okay, so if I then kind of a very high resolution spectrometer, and if I measure each line into its neighborhood, and if I measure the intensity of the line or the decrease in the intensity of the line, I would find a certain kind of a shape. Okay, and that is what it means to be a line shape. So if I knew all the elements found into the atmosphere of the Earth, then I can calculate the line shape for each of this material, and then once I have done it, my job is done. Okay, then all of things is done. But that's not easy. That's not all. Line shape is not a constant thing. It keeps on changing depending on the various factors. So what causes the line shape change? Okay, so let me go back to this figure. Okay, now as I said, what gives the line? So when electron is in this energy state and goes into this energy state, for example, or this energy state, let's take this line. Okay, if electron was here in this energy state and went into this energy state, radiation will be lost. Radiation will be absorbed corresponding to this frequency. You can very accurately calculate what would be that change into the energy, and from that what would be the frequency of the radiation. This is because this line looks very sharp, but this energy state looks very sharp, but this is just a diagram. Actual energy states are not sharp. Why? Because Heisenberg's uncertainty principle is that just that you cannot very accurately determine the energy state. What I hope you remember the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. Okay, if you had a very short lifetime, you can measure the energy accurately. If you had a long lifetime, you can measure the energy not that accurately. So this line will have kind of a width or kind of a fuzziness around itself that will correspond to the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. Similarly, this line will also have a fuzziness about itself, and energy from here to here will not be on an exact number, but it will be a range of numbers corresponding to this fuzziness, corresponding to this error, or corresponding to the uncertainty principle. And because of that, what you actually expect from that is just one line here at a zero value, but what you really get is a kind of a broad spectrum like this of line intensity. Okay. There are another reasons that line has a broadening, that is called normal broadening. That is because when energy is lost Okay, oscillations are getting dampened. Okay, but Heisenberg uncertainty and normal broadening has a much lower contribution compared to other factors that affects the line shape. The other factor that affects the line shape is, for example, when two molecules collide with each other, okay, they temporarily change the energy state of the electron orbits inside their orbit, or even all other energy states, for example, vibrational or rotational, all those things we have seen earlier. Okay, so during this time, if there is an electron or radiation is taking transitions, you will get kind of a broadening. You will not get the one single frequency. You will get absorption at range of the frequencies. Okay, and what does that number of collisions depends onto it? So it will depend on to the number of molecules present into the unit volume. And what does it mean to be a number of molecules in a unit volume? It means the pressure. Okay, more the number of molecules in a unit volumes, more the pressure. So this is called pressure broadening, and the pressure broadening can be calculated using this equation where alpha, this number, depends on to the pressure. Okay, and this is called Lorentz profile because Lorentz is derived first time. Sorry. Okay. So there is other thing you have to think about the line broadening is that molecules are moving all the time in various directions. Okay, they have thermal velocities, and there is there are laws for that how this thermal energy is distributed. Uh, this kinetic energy because of the temperature in the molecules distributed. So even if there is no collisions are taking place, because all the molecules are moving in very random directions with different velocities, because they are moving with respect to you as a detector, they will have kind of a Doppler shift from various ranges. Okay, and that can be characterized with these equations. And if you would have plotted, the Doppler broadening would look like these things shown in this curve. So if you are studying in the atmosphere and you are studying only the say lower altitude, like into the boundary layer or altitude below 20 kilometers, for example, you have to worry about the pressure broadening. Okay, you have a line, and then that line hasn't shape. That shape has changed because of the pressure broadening. You have to worry that for below 20 kilometers or maybe below 50 kilometers. But if you are studying the atmosphere above 50 kilometers, mostly you have to worry about the Doppler broadening because there are not many collisions. The atmosphere is so thin, they don't collide with each other, but they are moving randomly because of the different with different velocities and in different directions. So you get kind of a different frequency shifts. Okay. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
My connection broke, so I reconnected. I don't know what up to what point I was when connection broke. So I was talking about the knowledge. Hello. Yeah.
Your presentation.
Can you tell me what was the last thing you heard from me, so I can check what I. Hello.
Yes, sir.
What was the last point you could heard from me? So that is the point I should restart, because I don't know when exactly it lost the connections. Did I already finish this explaining the pressure broadening and Doppler broadening?
Sir, you were on pressure broadening.
Okay. Okay. So let me briefly recap. So,
Sir, the screen is not visible. Sir.
in ideal, my screen is not visible. Okay. Just 1 second. Okay. Is it visible now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah. So in ideal situation, you can have monochromatic light or monochromatic absorption at just single wavelength. Okay. Corresponding to the certain energy state. But energy states are not kind of in very sharp lines. They are kind of in fuzzy lines, and because of that, you will have kind of an range of wavelength. Okay, maybe very small. Okay, but still a range of wavelength around that center point. That we call it Heisenberg's answer. That is because of the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle and normal broadening. But that doesn't matter much. What matters for us is the pressure broadening and Doppler broadening. So why does the pressure broadening arises? Okay, so molecules, they keep on colliding with each other. When they collide with each other, they change that energy structure, the energy levels. So you have actually kind of an so unlike earlier, like sharp energy levels, you have kind of an range of energy levels. Okay, so instead of single line, like in this case, you would have expected a single line from 0 going up. Instead, you have kind of an intensity or absorption intensity changing from some numbers to getting maximum at the center and then decreasing. Okay. So if it is because of this collisions, this is what that line shape would look like. Okay, and that was given by the Lorentz by this equation. Okay, in this equation, that alpha, that parameter, sorry, that depends on to the pressure. Similarly, in like very high altitude, when the density is very low, all the molecules are moving here and there randomly. So you know that when there is a source moves with respect to the observer, there is a Doppler shift. Okay, and these air molecules or gas molecules, they have kind of in thermal velocities that is not same for all the molecules. They are having different velocities and they are moving in different directions randomly. So what you will see is that combination of them. So you will see not one wavelength, but because of the Doppler shifts, range of the wavelength from some number to some number, depending on to the what kind of velocity distribution is there. Okay, so if you are an atmospheric scientist and if you are studying the atmosphere above 50 kilometers, you will not worry much about the collision of these particles. What you will worry about is random movement of the particles and what that will lead to the Doppler shift. But if you are a scientist who is studying the atmosphere below, say, 20 kilometers, you will not worry about this collision of the this Doppler shift of the particles. What you will worry about is the collision of the particles. Okay, and where does this? So how does the collision increases when there are more number of particles within a given volume? Collision will increase. If there are more number of the particles in a volume, you will have more pressure. That's what the ideal gas law else, isn't it? So what, and that's what is called the pressure broadening. And so, but if you are studying the atmosphere between 20 kilometer and 50 kilometer, you may have effect of both of these thing, and you have to take care of them when you are doing the radiative transfer calculations. And it may look a combination of these two shapes, and that's called Voigt shape. Okay. Okay. So far we have been kind of talking about the other things, but we have not talked about the actually radiative transfer. Okay, and radiative transfer actually starts with the radiative transfer equation. How much time it is now? Okay, I think we have still 15 minutes or so. So what is that we want to study? As I said repeatedly many times, we want to study the transfer of the energy from one place to another place. Okay, so let us say you have a beam of radiation, and then it moves through a material or some kind of a volume. Okay, and then it comes out of the other side. So let us say it was an intensity was I when it was started, and when it came out, when it traveled the distance ds, that is a small distance, for example, and it has changed by di lambda. Okay, so you had an I, now you have I plus di. Okay, for a distance travel for the ds. So what is your job is to find out the di. Of course, lambda subscript indicates that we are talking about monochromatic light. Okay, but many of time I will not speak of the subscript because it makes very talking about them is very cumbersome process. So you should understand that I mean actually di lambda when I say di. Okay, so what can happen? Two things can happen, obviously. Either energy can be lost from this beam, or intensity can be lost from this beam, or there can be a gain of the energy. There can be increase in the intensity as this beam moves along the direction of ds. Okay, so okay, so this is so this term tells you loss of the energy, loss of the intensity, and this term tells you the gain of the energy. Okay, and what does that will depend on to it? Okay, I think we have covered this part. Let us say K is a cross section of an mass cross section of the material. Then you multiply mass cross section with mass density, concentration. That would be the amount will matter. So I think we have not covered the Beer-Lambert law, but anyway, we will come to that. So you remember that this is how you can write it. Okay, let us say you had an initial intensity, and that traveled ds. Then the decrease will be like K into rho. Rho is a concentration of the material. So of course this can be because of the absorption of the material, like we have earlier talked about various line absorptions and so on, or this can be because of the scattering of the material. We have not talked so far scattering, but you remember that scattering can reduce your amount of the radiation. What could be the gain terms? We know that Planck's function. So if we know that material, if the metal has a certain temperature, it will have a certain amount of the radiation emitted from that at that wavelength. Okay, so you can have a Planck's function as a source, and there are like scattering. So scattering can be both. It can be a loss process and it can be a gain process. For example, scattering happening into the different directions and getting redirected into the beam can add also. Okay, so this can be containing both scattering and emissions by the Planck's function. Okay, so if you do these things, what you can do is that you take out the K lambda common, K lambda into rho common, and ds other side like this, and you replace small j with this term, capital J lambda. You get an equation of this form, and this is the equation. This is all you want to know. This is your starting point. This is the equation, that kind of an basis of all the equations in ready transfer, any field you go. Okay. Now, once we have these equations, what is the ultimate aim? I mean, we will be, of course, this is the equation that tells you that how the radiative transfer happens. Okay, but what that is not what you want. What you want is a value of I for certain distance ds, or something like that. So, finding solution of this equation is all about radiative transfer is the study of solution, finding the solution of this equation. That's all is radiative transfer. Okay. So let us take a very, very simple case. For example, we can think that there is no source. For example, let us say atmosphere is so thin that there is no secondary scattering. So only there is a scattering loss, but there is no increase in the radiation because of the scattering from other directions. We can also have a kind of a temperature where the Planck's function is negligible. Okay, so we can have a situation, real life situation, where J is nearly 0. Okay, then this equation would be transformed into this equation, and that equation is basically a statement of the Beer-Buffer-Lambert law. So now, what is a Beer-Buffer-Lambert? So if you are studying chemistry, or if you are studying the instrumentation, or if you are studying, of course, if you are studying the radiative transfer, you will always have this. Even if you are studying remote sensing, you will always have to deal with Beer-Buffer-Lambert law. Okay, so let us spend little time onto that. So what is the Beer-Buffer-Lambert law? So it started with Buffer drinking the wine. He was in a vacation in Portugal, and in a nice house there was a table, and on the table there was a beam of light coming through the window and falling onto this table. Okay, and he had a cup of glass. He had one glass there put onto the table, and then it so happened that beam was directly falling onto this glass. Okay, and then he poured a little wine into it, and then that beam that was going through the wine and falling onto the table got a little bit reduced. Okay, so he put more wine, and then the beam was further reduced. Then he put even more wine, and then beam was further reduced. So this Bouguer or Buffer, or I don't know what is the correct pronunciation, so I tried to find out this. So he was a French scientist basically, and when he got curious about it, he was the first person to even measure the intensity of the light and intensity of the solar light, compare the intensity of solar light and moonlight and so on. And his father was a hydrologist who kind of helped designing the ship, naval architectures and so on. Okay, so he kind of given a statement that decrease in the intensity is proportional to the length of the light that it travels into it. Okay, he, of course, I mean, he must be a very brilliant scientist. I mean, he and the Euler. I hope you know this name Euler. You will be, as long as you will live with the science, Euler's name, like Ramanujan. Euler is very, very famous mathematician. Okay, and they both participated into the one of this award, some competition kind of things, problem solving competitions, and Buffer actually beaten the Euler, so he must be very brilliant scientist, I guess. Anyway, so he gave this statement for several years later, and this is happening even before the Fraunhofer lines, and even before the black body radiations and anything was discovered. Okay, so this is something around 18th century. Okay, mid 18th century. Later comes Lambert. Now this name may sound familiar. You might have. He was a kind of a cartographist. He was a mathematician. He designed many of these map types, Lambertian map types, Lambertian surface, and all those terms you use. Actually, that comes from this scientist Lambert. Okay, and he gave that relationship that the decrease in the intensity is proportional to the length traveled and initial intensity. That is what his statement was, that the decrease in the intensity is the beam length of beam that length that it beam travels through the material plus what was the initial intensity. Now this may look very trivial, but it's not actually. If you think about it, it's not. Okay, if you have a kind of an, let's say if you had some money with you, for example, okay, and you are traveling into the train, for example, let us say train or by car or somewhere, whatever, going very long distance, and then somebody makes an statement that the expenses you will have is proportional to the length you travel. It may sound very obvious, yeah. I mean, if I travel more, I have more expenses. If I travel less, I will have less expenses. But if I make a statement that length you travel, the expenses will be proportional to the what initial money you had and the length you travel, then you may get kind of an curious that how it's possible that your expenses are not dependent on to the length, but it's also dependent on to the what initial money you had. Okay, so same is here. So this is not very obvious that it will be proportional to the original intensity, but that is what the Lambert said. Okay, and that's why his name is kind of remembered into the history to finding out that. Many years later, around 1850, maybe like 100 years later, there is one more scientist came, Beer. It has nothing to do with the beer that we drink. What he made the statement is that he was not worried about the length or initial intensity. What he was worried about the concentration. He was basically chemist. Okay, so he made a statement that concentration and length travel by the beam before it is completely extinguished is constant. So you can have you can have a material of lowest concentration but longer path length, or you can have a highly concentrated material but short distance, and that will remain constant. In this experiment, if you see, there is a laser beam that is a green color light falling onto this material, and then it going to the certain distance and getting, as it goes down, it's getting reduced and reduced and then kind of an extinguished. Okay, so now this law is remembered behind all these three. I mean, if you combine Beer's statement and if you combine the Lambert's statement, this is the equation, that is what you get. I lambda says that this is an initial intensity, rho says that this is a concentration, and K says that it's linearly proportional. So change into the intensity for a distance travel is linearly proportional to the concentration and the initial intensity. That is the Beer-Buffer-Lambert law, and this law will keep on harassing you for all of as long as you do the remote sensing work. Okay. So basically, this, as I mentioned in previous slide, this is nothing but simply a kind of an radiative transfer equation without source term. Okay, this law is nothing but the radiative transfer equation without source term, and our aim is to find out the solution to this equation. Okay, so what you can do is that you can do the integration. Okay, if you do the integration, this is what you will get. Okay, I lambda equal to I lambda at s equal to 0, then exponential integration from 0 to whatever distance s1 you travel, and then this term. Now, many of the circumstances, for example, if you are having a small material like this, for example, here, or if you are kind of an instrument with a small kind of an sampling chamber or so on, you can consider K constant. You can consider the material homogeneous within this length. So you can keep the K outside of this integration. And then if you do these integrations, you will have kind of an path length U, and this is the equation you will get. Okay, so this equation tells you that what intensity to expect when you have some intensity starting with certain intensity. Or in other words, you can say that you can take this term to other side, it will come with denominator. So I lambda upon I lambda 0, that is nothing but the transmittance. So transmittance is exponentially proportional to the cross sections multiplied by the path length. Okay. That okay. So let me stop here. We will start from this point onward. Okay. So if you have any questions, let us stop for timing and let me have your questions, and let's try to address that one. Yes, everybody, can you listen here?
So,
Yeah, Misal.
so that zero is for transmittance? I couldn't hear you.
You mean in this equation?
Yes, sir. No, in the below equation.
Here.
I lambda S1 is yes, sir.
Okay. Zero is to indicate the initial position actually. So you started with say S equal to 0. You had a certain intensity. So intensity is a
Okay.
function of the position. So okay, so your beam is traveling say in this direction. So let us call this as an S0. Okay, and this let us call it an S1.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. I think I will stop here. Misal says that you can't hear me now. Can you hear me now? Or
Yes, sir. Now we can hear you.
okay. Let me switch on the videos. Yeah. So if you have questions, please write down into the chat box, or maybe just raise a hand and tell. Otherwise, we will end the class here today.
Hello.
Yeah, Heath.
Sir, as we seen there lambda max and f mu max, they both are different. Means we cannot get a relation of c is equal to f lambda. Sir, I understand that mathematical term you have explained that there is a lambda term, but sir, how we can visualize that thing? Means it's a kind of a decreasing in velocity, or there are other reasons.
Sorry, I couldn't get you all of the question. Your question is related to this slide?
No, sir. At the initial point where we have find the lambda max and mu max.
Okay. Here.
Sir, here we have, as you told, that we cannot find a mu max from c is equal to f lambda.
Yes, yes.
And you explained that mathematically how we cannot do that. But sir,
Yeah, we will get different answers.
But sir, what happened means it's because of a decreasing in velocity. Means as you explain in mathematically, but I don't understand what is happening in conquer form.
Yeah, let me explain you. Okay. Okay, so this is like a spectrum, okay, and this is spectrum in terms of the wavelength, okay. This is a black body radiation spectrum in terms of the wavelength. Even though I written the equation in terms of the frequency, but this is actually in terms of the wavelength, okay. And if you look at the unit, okay, that unit are kilowatt per steradian per meter square per nanometer. That nanometer comes from the fact that we are doing this exercise in terms of the wavelength. Okay. So what is the total energy? So total energy is area under this curve. Okay. Now I can take like vertical lines. Okay. two vertical lines, for example, if I take, okay, then I will get an energy below, and if I integrate within these vertical lines, I will get energy for that wavelength ranges. I hope that is clear. Okay.
Sir. Yes.
Yeah. So what you have actually this curve is that that curve's direction into the, so each vertical strip you can think below this curve is a kind of an you can say density of the energy. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So that so when you do this curve in terms of the say wavelength, you have a certain density of the energy for an wavelength interval, for some wavelength interval. Okay. You can go on making this wavelength interval smaller, but in a way the energy density or number of amount of the energy packed within the unit wavelength interval is kind of an fixed. Now you do this exercise, same exercise in terms of the, for example, when you do same way, like you can take these vertical strips below these things, then you will have an energy density in terms of the frequency. Okay. I hope I'm making sense, or is it going over the head? Yeah. So what I want to tell you is that for a unit distance travel into the direction of the x-axis is corresponding to the energy being kind of an per unit frequency or per unit wavelength. Okay. So energy per unit frequency and energy per unit wavelength is not the same number. They are basically different quantities. They are not physically same thing. Okay. I'm saying that I have a kind of a 1 joule of energy per unit interval of say 1 nanometer. I mean, I have say 1 joule of energy per 1 nanometer, and I say I have 1 joule of energy per 1 hertz. For example, if I say this statement, I'm not talking about the same quantity. I'm talking about very different kind of physical parameters. They may look same. I mean, why I put this exercise, why I ask you to think about it is that they look very same, but they are not same thing. They are actually two different things. Okay. When you have this unit, this spectral radiance is not the same thing as a spectral radiance. So this is a spectral radiance for the wavelength domain. You have a spectral radiance for the frequency domain, and they both are not same thing. It's not like that spectral radiance for the wavelength domain just represented with the spectral radiance for the frequency domain just represented with the wavelength domain. No, it is not that. They are both different quantities. Like if I say, let's say, if say I say velocity and angular momentum, for example, they are very different things. I mean, you don't expect to be, they may have some relationship between themselves, but they are not physically same thing, isn't it? Same way, spectral radiance in terms of the wavelength per unit wavelength and spectral radiance per unit frequency are not the same thing.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Then, if there are no more questions, then maybe we'll end this session here. Thank you. Or maybe I still be 2 minutes more.
I guess we can conclude these lectures, sir. So no one is having any
Okay,
questions.
okay, thank you. And Akhil, I wanted to put one request to you.
Yes, sir.
There is one my colleague Malay Devana. He was there last time into these things. Maybe you include him into the mailing list. So whenever there is a lecture, he can. He also gets the link. So he often wants to. Today I actually forgotten to forward this link to him. But it would be better you include him into the main list of the students so he can attend
Okay, sir.
this.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you then. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.